The construction foreman thought he was dealing with just another know-it-all engineer, trying to tell him how to do his job. But when the project owner arrived and called that same engineer boss, the foreman realized he had just made the biggest mistake of his career.
Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and a comment before we start to learn more about what happened.
The morning sun cast long shadows across the construction site of the future Riverside Medical Center, a $50 million project that would serve the growing community of Riverside, California. The skeletal framework of the six-story building reached toward the sky like steel fingers, while crews of workers moved with practiced efficiency across the site. Hard hats dotted the landscape in bright yellow, orange, and white, creating a mosaic of organized chaos. David Williams pulled his silver Audi Q7 into the temporary parking area, gravel crunching under his tires. At 42, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent 2 decades turning architectural dreams into concrete reality. His tailored suit had been replaced this morning with steel-toed boots, dark jeans, and a white button-down shirt under a reflective safety vest. A hard hat sat on the passenger seat beside a leather folder containing the latest structural reports. This wasn't David's first visit to the site, but it would be his most important. Yesterday's engineering review had revealed potential issues with the foundation work on the east wing. Nothing catastrophic, but serious enough to warrant immediate attention. As the lead architect and project owner, David had designed every beam, calculated every load-bearing wall, and approved every structural element. The building rising before him was more than steel and concrete. It was his vision made manifest. Mike Sullivan had been running construction crews for over 20 years, and in his mind that experience trumped any college degree or fancy blueprint. At 55, he was built like the buildings he constructed, solid, unyielding, and designed to last. His weathered hands had laid more foundation blocks than most engineers had ever seen, and his crew respected him for his no-nonsense approach to getting things done. Sullivan stood near the East Wing Foundation, reviewing the day's work schedule with his foreman team. The concrete pour was scheduled to begin at noon, and he intended to stay on schedule regardless of any last-minute changes from the suits downtown. In his experience, architects designed pretty pictures, but construction workers built real buildings. When David approached the group of workers, Sullivan barely glanced up from his clipboard. Another engineer, he assumed, probably fresh out of college with theories but no practical experience. The man looked young, well-dressed, and carried himself like someone who had never actually swung a hammer or mixed concrete. "Excuse me," David said, his voice carrying the polite but authoritative tone of someone used to being heard. "I need to speak with whoever's in charge of the foundation work." Sullivan looked up, taking in David's appearance with barely concealed irritation. "That would be me. Mike Sullivan, construction foreman. And you are?" "David Williams. I'm here about the East Wing Foundation. We need to discuss some structural concerns before today's concrete pour." Sullivan's expression hardened, another pencil pusher trying to tell him how to do his job. "Structural concerns? The foundation is fine. We've been pouring concrete since before you were out of diapers." David maintained his composure, though he noted the immediate dismissiveness in Sullivan's tone. "I understand you have extensive experience, but there are some load calculations that need to be reviewed. The soil density reports from last week indicate—" "Listen here," Sullivan interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "I don't know what engineering firm sent you down here, but we don't need some college boy telling us how to pour concrete. The foundation meets all the specs, and we're moving forward on schedule." David felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came with being prejudged and dismissed. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm not trying to delay your work. I'm trying to prevent a structural failure that could compromise the entire building." Sullivan laughed, a harsh sound that carried across the construction site. "Structural failure? Son, I've been building since you were learning your ABCs. I think I know a thing or two about foundations." "I'm sure you do," David replied, his patience wearing thin. "But I'm the one who designed this building, and I'm telling you there's a problem with the current foundation specifications." "You designed this building?" Sullivan's voice dripped with skepticism. "Right. And I'm Frank Lloyd Wright. Look, kid, I don't know what game you're playing, but I've got a schedule to keep. Either show me some official paperwork with your supervisor's signature, or get off my site." David reached into his folder and pulled out the latest engineering reports, along with his business card. "These are the soil density reports that came in yesterday. The load-bearing capacity of the East Foundation needs to be recalculated before—" Sullivan waved the papers away without looking at them. "I don't have time for this nonsense. Security!" Two security guards approached, their yellow hard hats marking them as site supervisors. "What's the problem, Mike?" one of them asked. "This guy's claiming he designed the building and trying to stop our concrete pour. Says there's some kind of structural problem that only he can fix." The security guard looked at David with the practiced eye of someone used to dealing with unwanted visitors. "Sir, do you have authorization to be on this construction site?" David pulled out his phone and showed them his corporate ID. "I'm David Williams, principal architect at Williams and Associates. This is my project." Sullivan scoffed. "Williams and Associates? Never heard of them. The real architect is some big shot firm from downtown. This guy's probably trying to run some kind of scam." "I am the architect," David said firmly. "I've designed over 200 buildings in Southern California, including this medical center. And right now I'm telling you that if you pour that concrete today without addressing the foundation issues, you'll be tearing it all down in 6 months." "That's enough," Sullivan said, his face reddening. "I don't know what you're trying to pull here, but I'm not buying it. Real architects don't show up to construction sites dressed like they're going to a casual Friday meeting. They send their assistants with proper documentation." David felt the weight of assumptions pressing down on him like the steel beams overhead. In Sullivan's mind, an architect, especially one important enough to design a $50 million project, would look different, speak different, and certainly wouldn't show up alone to a construction site. "Mr. Sullivan," David said, his voice taking on the edge of authority that his employees recognized immediately, "I'm going to say this one more time. I designed this building. I own this project, and I'm ordering you to stop the concrete pour until we can address the foundation issues." Sullivan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You're not ordering me to do anything. I take orders from the real project owner, not some wannabe trying to cause trouble. Now get off my site before I have you arrested for trespassing." The confrontation had drawn the attention of several workers who stopped their tasks to watch the exchange. David could feel their eyes on him, some curious, some skeptical, all waiting to see how this power struggle would resolve itself. David pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the project manager right now. Maybe you'll believe him when he tells you who I am." "Call whoever you want," Sullivan replied smugly. "But you're still leaving this site." As David dialed, Sullivan turned back to his crew. "All right, everybody back to work. We've got a concrete pour to prepare for, and I don't want any more delays." The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Thompson Construction Management. This is Brad." "Brad, it's David Williams. I'm on site at Riverside Medical, and I need you to come down here immediately. We have a situation with the foreman who refuses to acknowledge my authority." "David, what's going on? Is Mike giving you trouble?" Mike Sullivan is refusing to listen to my structural concerns and claims he doesn't believe I'm the project architect. He's threatened to have me arrested for trespassing. He what? Brad's voice rose in disbelief. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't let him pour any concrete until I arrive. David ended the call and looked at Sullivan, who was pretending not to have overheard the conversation. The project manager is on his way. I suggest you wait for him before making any more decisions you might regret. Sullivan shrugged. Fine by me. But when he gets here and confirms that you're just some troublemaker, I want you banned from this site permanently. The 15 minutes that followed were among the most tense David had experienced on any construction project. Workers continued their tasks, but the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Sullivan made a show of reviewing his schedule and barking orders at his crew, while David stood near the East Wing Foundation, reviewing the engineering reports and making notes for the necessary corrections. The sound of tires on gravel announced Brad Thompson's arrival. The project manager's white Ford F-150 pulled up near the site trailer, and Brad emerged wearing his standard uniform of khaki pants, a company polo shirt, and a hard hat with Project Manager emblazoned across the front. Brad was a man who understood construction politics. At 58, he had managed hundreds of projects and knew that the delicate balance between architects, contractors, and construction crews required constant diplomatic navigation. But as he approached the group near the East Foundation, his expression was anything but diplomatic. "Mike," Brad called out as he walked toward them, "what the hell is going on here?" Sullivan straightened up, confident that he was about to be vindicated. "Brad, thank God you're here. This guy has been causing trouble all morning, claiming he's the architect and trying to stop our concrete pour. I told him he needed to leave, but he won't listen." Brad looked at Sullivan as if he had just claimed the earth was flat. "Mike, do you have any idea who you're talking about?" "Some troublemaker trying to run a scam, obviously. Claims his name is David Williams and that he designed the building." Brad's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, barely controlled anger. "Mike, that is David Williams. He did design this building. He owns this entire project." The words hit Sullivan like a physical blow. The color drained from his face as he looked back and forth between Brad and David, his confident demeanor crumbling like poorly mixed concrete. That's impossible," Sullivan stammered. "The architect is supposed to be some big shot from a major firm. This guy's just—" "The principal architect at Williams and Associates," Brad finished for him. "One of the most respected architectural firms in Southern California. Mike, you just spent the last hour telling the man who's paying your salary that he doesn't know what he's talking about." David stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "Mr. Sullivan, now that we've established who I am, can we please address the foundation issues? The soil density reports indicate that the current specifications won't support the load requirements for the upper floors." Sullivan looked like a man who had just realized he was standing in quicksand. "Mr. Williams, I didn't know. I mean, nobody told me." "Nobody told you because you didn't give anyone a chance to explain," David replied. "You made assumptions about who I was based on what I looked like, and you refused to listen to my professional concerns." Brad shook his head in disgust. "Mike, in 20 years of project management, I've never seen anything like this. You questioned the authority of the project owner and threatened to have him arrested for trespassing on his own construction site." Sullivan's hands trembled as he reached for the engineering reports David had tried to show him earlier. "About these foundation issues. What exactly needs to be done?" David opened his folder and spread the documents across a nearby table. "The soil analysis shows that the bearing capacity in this section is 30% lower than our original calculations. We need to either redesign the foundation with additional support columns or relocate this section of the building. As David explained the technical details, Sullivan listened with the desperate attention of a man trying to salvage his career. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The same information Sullivan had dismissed as college boy nonsense was now being received as gospel truth. "How long will the corrections take?" Brad asked. "If we add support columns, we can probably complete the modifications in 3 days," David replied. "But if we ignore the problem and pour concrete today, we'll be looking at a complete foundation rebuild in 6 months." Sullivan swallowed hard. "Mr. Williams, about earlier. I want to apologize. I was out of line." David looked at him for a long moment before responding. "Mr. Sullivan, apologies are easy. What's hard is learning from this experience. How many other times have you dismissed someone's expertise because they didn't look like what you expected?" The question hung in the air like dust from a demolition. Sullivan had no answer because the truth was uncomfortable. This wasn't the first time he had made assumptions about people based on their appearance, age, or background. Brad cleared his throat. "Mike, I think you need to take the rest of the day off. Come back tomorrow with a better attitude, or don't come back at all." As Sullivan gathered his tools and walked toward the parking area, David turned his attention back to the foundation issues. The confrontation was over, but the real work was just beginning. 3 days later, the modified foundation was complete, with additional support columns that would ensure the building's structural integrity for decades to come. David stood on the site one final time before the concrete pour, reviewing the changes with Brad and the new foreman who had replaced Sullivan. "You know," Brad said as they watched the concrete trucks arrive, "Mike called yesterday asking for his job back, said he'd learned his lesson." David watched the workers guiding the concrete into the forms, their movements precise and professional. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that some lessons come with consequences. This building will serve this community for 50 years or more. I can't afford to have people on my crew who put their prejudices ahead of structural safety." As the concrete began to flow into the newly reinforced foundation, David reflected on the incident. In his 20-year career, he had designed hospitals, schools, office buildings, and residential complexes. Each project had taught him something about engineering, about construction, and about people. But this project had taught him something different, that expertise doesn't always come in the package people expect, and that the most dangerous assumptions are the ones that go unexamined. The Riverside Medical Center would open 18 months later, serving thousands of patients and employing hundreds of healthcare workers. Built on a foundation that was stronger than originally planned, it would stand as a testament to the importance of listening to expertise, regardless of where it comes from. And somewhere in the blueprints, filed away in the architectural records, was a note about the foundation modifications that saved the building, a reminder that sometimes the most important voices are the ones people try hardest not to hear. Never assume you know someone's qualifications based on their appearance. Expertise comes in many forms, and the person you dismiss today might be the person whose knowledge could save your career tomorrow.